everybody, it's Natasha Koo from Intolign, and today, since Yahim and I have been already traveling for some time now, I would love to give you a little bit of my reflection on what I like or don't really like about Asia. And a lot of people have been asking me, like, where are you gonna end up settling? What do you like better, Europe or Asia? And to be honest, I was kind of surprised myself that what bothered me most, or what I find difficult adapting to, isn't the food or the environment or the people. It actually has to do with communication and culturally what is acceptable and what isn't. So I'm just gonna give you a really honest reflection on some things that I still find really hard to accept while I'm here in Asia. So maybe it has to do with just our friendship circles or the type of work that Yahim and I do. But usually back in Switzerland, when we meet with our friends, when we meet with our family, we usually have quite heartfelt and quite honest conversations. And especially in our work, it has to be honest, otherwise it's not gonna get very far. The clients aren't gonna get their results. So Yahim and I are used to these interactions where we don't do much small talk. We dive straight into what our friends are going through, what the client's going through, and we share really openly, like we have nothing to hide. And there are so few things that we are uncomfortable with to share or to talk about. So that's the nature of relationships usually back home. So since we've been traveling about and seeing a lot of family friends, seeing a lot of people from different countries, but mostly all in Asia, we've realized that there are customs and there are cultural aspects that are, I guess, not as appropriate here, right? So for example, one thing would be relations. So I think culturally in Asia is more of a unifying, more of a group mentality, while in the Western world it's more of a emphasis on individuality and finding yourself and expressing yourself and being representing you. Well, I think in Asia there is a lot of emphasis on, well, like, which family do you come from, what's your last name, who is kind of your people and who is not your people. So there's this distinction where you are not just the individual, but you are a representation of the family. So I mean, I guess also in the Western world, in Europe or North America, like, people also see themselves as a part of their family, but there's less attachment to your actions showing or representing the family poorly. Like, if you do something bad, then you did something bad, not the family, right? Because it's your individual actions. While here, what the individual does reflects a lot upon the family, where you come from or who you represent or who you're connected with. So this has to do for me with losing face, trying to keep an image in place, trying to keep an ideal together. And it's a bit difficult for me to kind of accept, wrap my head around, probably because I have been raised in Canada, yet I was born in Hong Kong with kind of an Asian influence in parenting. Now the second thing actually contradicts with the third, which is kind of crazy. The second thing is that there is little personal space. So that means, either it's physically, you're waiting in line, you're trying to get either at the cashier, then people stand a lot closer to one another simply because there's not as much space, right? And because there is less personal space, when I was just in Hong Kong the other day, I was walking around like a big giant, like a big ogre, being kind of sloppy, and I was doing all sorts of things that were wrong. For example, I was at the bathroom, I washed my hands, public washroom, and usually I don't like to use a paper towel, just because I don't want to waste extra resources if I don't have to. So I usually just shake the water off. But I didn't realize that in Hong Kong, space is so precious, and there's literally people right next to me here, next to me there, and I'm just shaking my water off my fingers like I would normally anywhere else in the world. And of course it would spray all over the woman who probably just came down to have lunch in her office wear. So that's one thing that also I was trying to adapt towards, is that, well, my personal space is not as big as I am used to. It's much closer. I have to line up at the cashier in lines on subways, much closer to strangers, and I have to be very aware of what I'm doing. I also got in trouble in Hong Kong for having my umbrella open high, even though there was a tiny bit of a covering over top, and the man behind me said, "Oh, it's in the way, it's getting in my face, put your umbrella down, there's something above your head, you don't need that." So it's like, oh my goodness, I was trying to order some food, so I didn't realize that having the umbrella open on my shoulder right here would obstruct or hurt the person behind me. So it was just all these inconsiderate little things, just because I'm totally unaware of how much personal space I actually take. But when you're in a very crowded space like in Asia, then you gotta just bring it in, and you gotta act quickly, you gotta get in gear, you gotta just do the transaction, whether you're at the bank, you're at a restaurant, you gotta order quickly, you gotta get out of there. If you sit down and it's lunchtime, they'll tell you have 1.5 hours to have lunch, and you better get out of there after that time, because other people will come in, right? So that personal space is not just limited to space, it's actually limited to also time, and how efficient you are and how quickly you walk, the list goes on. Now for number 3, even though the personal space is much less, there is something kind of strange about Asia culturally, and how there is a lot of emphasis on wealth. And there's a lot of comparison when it comes to wealth, and I think I get where this comes from. Like for many developing countries, there is a huge difference in wealth disparity, poverty, and wealth within countries, and because of that, there is a huge range of quality of life that people enjoy or don't get to enjoy. And sometimes that disparity is really, really difficult. It's really dramatic. It's actually quite heartbreaking if you see that. But that also means that, for example, for men, even though in China there's way more men than women, the men who are doing much more wealthy and have much better jobs have no problem finding a wife, while men who are still maybe in the rural areas or who aren't as better off will definitely have a problem finding a wife. So this wealth and how it plays a role in people's lives and how it changes people and how there is this comparison going on is something that I had to face even when I was growing up. When I would visit China to see my grandparents, I would see this too. I would see this emphasis on wealth and this comparison, this competition, and it's quite tough. But culturally, how that actually boils down to my personal interactions with people and my adaptation to Asia is that people have no problem asking how much money you make now or before, what you invest in, what types of projects you have, all sorts of personal questions, down to the number of clients you have, down to, for example, Yahim and I made a recent investment here in the F&B space. So it's a beverage, and there's no holding back when it comes to how much did the construction cost, how much did license fee cost, how much is the profit margin of a cup. I mean, all these questions people have no problem asking or getting to know. So wealth seems to be something that people really value, people really care about, but I'm not really bothered by the fact that people are curious. I'm more bothered by the fact that people are using that information to categorize you. So once people kind of hear that, there's a reason they're so curious, right? So once the people get to know like your wealth level or how much you're making or how you're doing financially, they'll categorize you into a certain place. And then from there, how they kind of treat you will be different. And I just find that to be completely counter to like the values I have, that you treat everyone the same, that no matter financially how they're doing, everyone's still deserving of respect and love and like all these things, right? So it's, for me, kind of strange to see this whole contrast between your personal space getting a lot smaller because physically there is just that constraint, while when it comes to finances and getting to know each other's wealth and all these personal questions, people have no issue like really getting into your space. So these are definitely some of the cultural norms that I've been finding it difficult to adapt towards. And I think at the end of the day, when you have a culture who really emphasizes on saving face or keeping face or representing a certain ideal, for me that becomes a little bit less honest. I, for one, definitely value deep connections and connecting through the present moment versus what do I have financially in common with you. And I think that for me is much more important, and that is the foundation of my connections with people all over the world, and that's what I'm trying out here in Asia. So when people are, hesitant to dive so deeply with me, and I can begin to see that the words they are saying are not at all matching how they are feeling or what I know to be true, then I just respect and I give them that space, because I think that's the culturally appropriate thing to do. And of course the same thing happens also in Canada, in Europe. You can ask a friend how they're really doing, and sometimes they can say, oh, I'm fine, when they're feeling totally different. And the same thing would probably apply with also just, give them as much care and know where my place is, and not get too much into people's stuff too, just because people might be putting on a front or trying to keep some image going, and I might not actually believe what exactly they're saying. That doesn't mean that I'm going to kind of like tarnish their image and kind of burst their bubble. I'm gonna leave people as they are and respect where they're at. So here are some cultural differences that I've noticed that have been a little bit difficult for me lately to deal with, but different places, different people, different cultures, and that's a part of traveling. So thanks for watching today, and let me know in your travels around the world, what types of cultural differences have you dealt with in the past. See you again soon.